you, mate? Sorry, Dr. Darren.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, very good, thank you, in the circumstances.
Yeah, I know. And usually, mate, when we catch up, we have a bit of a laugh, but obviously things are pretty serious right now. We've both been unemployed in our lives, but never in circumstances like this. We're facing sort of, 1929, 1918, all wrapped in this major sort of health and economic crisis. So thanks, mate, for catching up. I just wanted to talk, you've done a lot of work with us with job seekers over the years. Just really wanted to talk to you about advice you have for job seekers in this incredible time, some of the experiences, the mental health challenges they're going through, and then also advice for our consultants and all employment consultants in this sector as they face challenges of helping those people going through this quite incredible time. So mate, I guess, what are sort of the major differences now about being unemployed compared to sort of, usually, and the mental health impacts?
Yeah, it's a really good point because it is different. I've spent my career and my PhD studying behavioural change in the unemployed, what it's really like to be unemployed, what to do about it, why isn't everyone immediately trying to get back to work when they're made unemployed. But I've almost had to screw that up and throw it out the window because this is such a weird circumstance. There's never been a better time to be unemployed. And there's never been a worse time to be unemployed. It's good because it's a good time to be unemployed because there's less red tape now and conditionality. The government's being a bit more generous than they've ever been before. It's unprecedented, particularly for a centre-right government. The banks are a bit more understanding, and there's less social stigma for being unemployed. You're one of an extra, 1 million, 1.5 million, who knows where it's going to finish. We've seen in America, the people, unemployment claimants have gone up to 6 million from something like 600,000 in a matter of 2 weeks. But there's less social stigma. You're not unemployed because you're a failure. You're not unemployed because you got sacked or you're doing a job that doesn't exist anymore. You're unemployed because of something totally external to you. And that is
not that we think any of those things normally, mate, but yeah, I know what you mean. There's that social stigma side of it, which is, I suppose, is quite hard to deal with for a lot of people. This is new. This situation is completely new.
Yeah,
being unemployed.
And that puts totally different demands on employment services and employment consultants to support. And the social stigma, from what we've seen in studies, isn't so much other people looking down on you. It's you being down on yourself and being embarrassed in front of family, friends, and who you used to be with and mixing with. What's interesting is when you used to get really large closures of pits and steelworks and shipbuilding.
Yeah, in my neck of the woods.
The community became unemployed, and again, it wasn't you. So the good thing about being unemployed now is there's less social stigma, and you can be less hard on yourself, which is really hard to recover from. And we've got the internet now and the opportunity to reskill and entertain ourselves at home.
But a lot of people won't be thinking like that. A lot of people will be, that they are unemployed. It's very hard to sort of accept that, despite all this additional help, at the end of the day, they'll be thinking, I'm unemployed, I desperately need money. So what are some of the ways they could tackle the challenges that are going on in their minds and sort of practical things they can do to tackle that?
In a way, it's the worst time to be unemployed as well. I just said the good points. The worst points is that there's the uncertainty, how to deal with that. It's not like you're waiting for a pickup in a cyclical economic trend. There's hundreds of thousands of other people you've now got to compete with to get a job. The people that are unemployed now often have higher debt. They took out mortgages and bought boats because it wasn't ever on their radar that entertainment, hospitality, airlines would be closing the doors or furloughing staff. And they're not used to job search. They're not used to having to do an application. They probably expect, if I write a handwritten letter applying for a job, I'll get a handwritten letter back. They won't realise that, no, most of the time you never hear back, and you've got to deal with that and have the resilience to deal with it. And of course, we can't socialise and go down the pub and lament with all of our ex-shipyard workers that were there. So what people have to deal with now is a lot more uncertainty. And there are ways of dealing with that. But for employment consultants as well, you have to deal with people that just don't know where they're headed, where this will end.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you, because we employ a lot of employment consultants, and so for them, this is a very new world as well. You know, what's some of the advice you can give them in terms of helping people who've become unemployed?
It's, first of all, dealing with people remotely rather than face to face is very different. There are a lot of tools and techniques for talking on the phone or on Zoom or FaceTime. It's brilliant that we can actually do this visual stuff because we are such visual animals. 70% of our communication's visual, but most of us are doing telephone interviews. I know of a provider that's been trying to do online group workshops where perhaps 6 people turned up and 5 of them refused to turn on their camera out of embarrassment, and yet they would have all been in the room together.
Yeah.
But there are things like verbal mirroring you need to do with people. Repeat back, listen, repeat back what they just said. Actually, that's a really weird thing. What I'm doing is gesticulating. It turns out when you gesticulate while you're talking on the phone, you're 30 to 40% more comprehensible, and your point gets across a lot better when you're gesticulating. Really weird because the people can't even see you're doing it, but there's something in your voice. But it's also the uncertainty. You can work with job seekers to deal with uncertainty and anxiety. Now we're in a really weird, I guess I'd call it a phony war period. Like before the Second World War, the first 9 months or so, nothing really happened. And it was almost a period of euphoria. And what we've seen in studies with job seekers is that in the first short period, maybe a month, 3 to 5 weeks of being unemployed, you actually become more sociable. You mix with people on the phone, online, or even in person, if you're allowed to do that, which you're not now, but you become more sociable. But then after that, your sociability declines massively. And there's an exact correlation with anxiety, stress, and depression. Everyone says, oh, you get made unemployed, get made redundant, and you know, you head into a massive depression. And indeed, it takes 5.1 years to recover your set point of life satisfaction after you're made.
And in this unique scenario, I mean, that is so exacerbated given this whole quarantine period, our needs to socially isolate, socially distance. So we go into this exacerbating that problem, really, don't we?
We do. There will be psychological strengths, and there's a lot more science and knowledge we have now as to how to enable people to cope with this. But again, I cannot emphasize enough, people are harshest on themselves and running themselves down. We're in the middle of a study now with PricewaterhouseCoopers where we've taken job seekers and measured their resilience as well as their readiness and willingness to get into work. And it turns out that those that are really up for getting back to work, really proactive, are really highly resilient, but also those that have absolutely no intention, desire, or confidence of getting a job are also the highest resilience. And then all the bits in between are in this U shape of commitment or resilience. So there are these 2 kinds of resilience. One makes you really proactive. The other one makes you shelter and go into yourself and not take any risks. And this is true. When you ask people what is resilience, they say, oh, it means bouncing back. It means moving forward. It means learning from your failures and what have you. You ask somebody else what is resilience, they say it means being safe, protecting myself, sticking to my guns, digging my heels in. And actually it's not. Resilience is psychological flexibility. It's being able to bend and bow and move and not get dragged down and have correct attributions for what's going on. And the beauty now is that we can reskill. But I think pretty much every one of the extra 1.5 million people that might become unemployed in Australia due to this has been on some sort of hedonic treadmill. This is actually giving society a chance to step back and regroup and rethink. The only thing that totally lowers your ability to actually make the best of this situation is the fear and the uncertainty. Where's my next buck coming from? Am I going to be able to pay my rent or mortgage? And that just drags you into a rabbit warren of anxiety.
So I guess, mate, on that point, so it's very hard to think in the way that you're describing. You've just been made unemployed, and it's very hard to think in that way. How can people sort of help themselves? And I'm also conscious, mate, I've taken your Saturday afternoon, so I said I keep this quite short. So what are those key pieces that we can offer job seekers to really become employed, how they can help build that resilience and maybe tackle and look at this in a different way?
The first thing is being able to deal with uncertainty, and there are a few key and proven ways of doing that. First of all, it's putting things in perspective. I could wax lyrical about putting this current situation into perspective, but people have their own ideas on that. But secondly, when you've lost the stability of a routine and a job and knowing money's coming in, you have to hold on to and identify the rocks in your life, the areas of stability. You have to create a new routine. You have to focus on family and recognize them and friends as your rocks. Your health, you've got to exercise, you've got to have daily chats or Zoom coffees with people. So that's having the second thing, putting it in perspective, holding on to your stable and identifying your rocks, then helping others and showing gratitude. Those two things are the single greatest ways that we can find of seizing back a sense of control. If you're making somebody else feel better about themselves, your strength and your resilience and your ability to cope with this uncertainty are much enhanced. Asking for help, it turns out from studies that only the mentally tough, the strongest and most resilient people actually ask for help.
It's fascinating, isn't it? There's so much you can achieve simply by asking, but so few of us do.
Yeah, it is weird. And again, it's because we're hard on ourselves as a species and we've got our own negativity bias. So we don't want to look like we're taking advantage of people, or we don't want to seem weak. So it's a really interesting scenario. And the other thing is accept the anxiety. People think, oh my God, I've got butterflies, I'm feeling anxious, I've got to be strong and look good for everyone else in the family and hide it all. But actually, anxiety has been naturally selected in us, as has depression. They both serve a really good purpose in the right proportion. So you don't have to be fearful of it. Recognize it, accept it for what it is. There's something going on here that I need to react to and adapt to, but don't try and drown it out with other noise in your head or drinking or whatever you might turn to in these times.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I made some very final advice for our employment consultants in Busy and in all providers around Australia. What are the key things that we can do slightly differently at this incredible time?
Listen. So give time to people on the phone. Do that verbal mirroring. And one of the key things you need to be is compassionate but not sympathetic. Sympathy makes people less proactive. People are going to be stressed and going to offload on you, and they're going to just blow their top at you. And you're going to have to be able to deal with that. And if you're a really over empathetic person, then you tend to absorb that and take it personally, whereas of course it isn't personal. We've seen lots of examples of people just getting really angry with doctors and chemists and people in supermarkets, and they're just responding to the anxiety they've got in their life. They're at a level 9 of anxiety, and a tiniest little thing blows them over the top. Yeah. So it's dealing with that, just listening to it, accepting it, repeating back, and going, I can understand how you feel, but not being patronizing, because your consultants are going to have to be strong. And again, we're in that first period of the phony war of what we're dealing with, of actually, this ain't so bad for the first month. We're only 2 weeks into this. Yeah. By week 4 or 5, we'll hit this wall of, we're going to have to deal with this and it's going to get worse. But what we can start doing is we can start building that resilience and acceptance.
And if it's okay, mate, look, I totally agree with you. I think there's a lot of us have sort of said in the last few weeks, actually, it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. Maybe we can have another chat, mate, in 3 or 4 weeks and talk about this, because I think you're absolutely right. We're going to get through this initial period of almost quarantine. Is novel for some people, and it's going to tire pretty quickly. Mate, I know we've been pretty serious today, so I might try and end it on a bit lighter for you. Have you got any quarantine hacks for us to keep us all sane?
Quarantine hats?
Hacks, not hats. Hacks with a H-A-C-K.
No, I mean, Bunnings are doing such an amazing amount of business from me at the moment, because my wife's setting me to so many tasks now we're in the house. That needs doing and that needs doing, but at least it's keeping us busy.
You'll need it all fixed afterwards though, right? You may as well just get someone else, hey? But
yeah, get a professional in to make good.
Mate, thank you for speaking to us today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the advice to everyone. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, and you for being so proactive, Paul, and busy. Take care.
And you, mate.